Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 3. Let's talk about it. So Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 3 opens up with some governmental propaganda. Yes, we do get this kind of commercial that talks about the role of the GRC. We heard the GRC be mentioned in the previous episode, but this time around we get a little bit more of an expansion on the role of this governmental body and what they're actually trying to do in this post-blip world. We see that they are supposed to be trying to help the people who disappeared during the snapping and reappeared during the blip in this world. And once again, we're exploring the real life consequences of Thanos' actions from Avengers Infinity War. And we see this body called the GRC, the Global Repatriation Council, be in charge of trying to recover society during this time. However, of course, there are certain complications in regards to that and how well they're actually doing their jobs, which we can talk about when we're discussing the role of the Flagsmashers, which once again will be at the end of this review, okay? And we'll discuss it, okay? I feel like up until now I've been neglecting the Flagsmashers for reasons that will become clear by the end of this review, but just know that I will be delving into them a little bit more in this review this time around because I do have a little bit more info on them. But at the end of the day, okay, at the end of the day, as fun as the Flagsmashers are, okay, we really came here to see, first of all, FakeCap, okay? We've come here to see FakeCap and his friend Lemar, and of course we've come here to see the titular characters themselves, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Before we even delve into their scenes, because I have a lot to say on that matter, as per always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Without further ado, let's dive into the rest of the episode. So first off, right after this commercial that we see about the GRC, we do in fact meet FakeCap once again with his sidekick Lemar, and they're kind of going on this mission of their own, trying to find out what happened to the Flagsmashers, and in particular to Carly, who seems to be their leader. And it seems as though they're kind of running out of patience at this point because they are also in Germany, in Munich, and they're trying to question people, but no one seems responsive. It seems as though, as Lemar remarks later on, that because of the cause of the Flagsmashers actually being an agreeable cause to a lot of people that were left behind during the snapping, a lot of people have this built-in loyalty to them, so they don't actually want to cooperate with Captain America, who's on the side of the GRC and on the side of these governmental bodies who seem to only be interested in, you know, trying to recover things for the people who actually disappeared, as opposed to the people who were left to deal with the fallout of Thanos' actions. And so you see, you know, the Captain America trying to interrogate this German man, but he can't speak German. Guess what? His friend Lemar can, which, by the way, once again, last week in my review I said that Lemar seemed more equipped, okay, more qualified to be Captain America, and lo and behold, he can even speak different languages the way that Steve could. So tell me what happened during the recruitment process. Tell me what happened during recruitment, because it seems to me that he can speak more than one language. It seems to me he has a better understanding and a better grasp of the role of being Captain America and all of its different facets. Like, it seems to me he also wants to abide by the rules way more than John Walker is capable of doing, even up until this point, which we'll talk about in a second. So what happened during recruitment? But anyways, it's during this scene where Captain America is trying to interrogate this German man and he's not having any of it, okay? And John Walker even has the audacity to be like, do you know who I am? And he's like, I do know and I don't care. He spits in his face and I'm like, oh. Oh, first of all, one of the things I hate seeing depicted on screen is someone spitting at someone's face. I despise that. Vomiting and spitting on someone's face, no. Please, society has progressed past the need for you to show me someone spitting on someone's face. Please, please, no more. And secondly, during that moment, I actually felt bad for Wyatt Russell himself, because not only has he had his face spat at on screen, but also off screen, figuratively speaking, because fans are like hating on this character. Like, fans have taken it too far. Listen, I joke here on this channel, I call him FakeCap, I say he's not my Captain America, blah blah blah, but he's a fictional character. Like, he's a fictional character, he's not real. And so to send him death threats, as some people have been doing, allegedly, apparently, is just out of order. Like, that's beyond the Call of Duty. That's insane. Like, please stop doing that. Okay, he's portraying a character, he's doing a hell of a job doing it, because he's quite unlikable in the role, as he should be, but it needs to end there. But I do think that in that moment, something shifted within him. I think it's always been there. We've seen elements of that, especially in the previous episode where we saw him say, you know, stay out of our way when it comes to Sam and Bucky pursuing that same mission that he is with Lemar and the government behind him. We've seen elements of that. But in this episode, it's made it very clear that he is more than happy to bend the rules if it means getting the results that the government want from him and getting this kind of praise as the new Captain America who's able to meet up to Steve Rogers' legacy. And again, as I said literally just a second ago, I think that in this case, Lemar is the one who's questioning that strategy, who's questioning, you know, what John Walker's intentions are in that moment, because he's like, are you sure you want to go down that route? And John Walker's like, yeah, like, they're not going to care how we got there, just so long as we get there. And I think in that moment, it's clear to me who has the best morals, okay, who has more of a stable moral foundation to them, and it seems to be Lemar. It doesn't seem to be John Walker, which is interesting, because if we go back to Captain America the First Avenger, it's made very clear that the natural kind of personality traits that you have, and, you know, the moral grounds that you have, or lack thereof, can just be amplified by the super soldier serum. And so if John Walker ends up getting the super soldier serum, which is likely to happen throughout this series, that little inkling, okay, of bending the rules, of doing whatever it takes to get what he wants, to look good as Captain America, that's just going to be amplified if he takes that serum, and he's going to end up being a worse person. And again, seeing just the sprinklings of that, even when he's just in his, you know, pure human form, but the peak of his human ability, is already quite worrying. So who knows what's going to end up and what's going to become of this character. But that's John Walker's role for this episode. We can now go ahead and move on to my favorite section of this episode, and indeed of the series overall, following the boys, okay, following my guys Sam and Bucky, because as we saw in the previous episode, they decided that the only way forward in order to pursue this mission, get more intel on the super soldiers that seem to be a part of the Flagsmashers, is to actually turn towards an old villain of theirs, okay, an old foe in the form of Helmut Zemo from Captain America Civil War. And we saw a glimpse of him in the previous episode. Well, in this episode, we finally get reintroduced to the character in style. Can I just say up front, okay, Daniel Bruhl, yes, every zero on that paycheck earned. He was amazing. He seems to have balanced this MCU quality of being a bad guy, being a villain, calculating, intelligent, skilled, very, very skilled, both physically and mentally. He's balanced that with that just that drop of humor, that drop of comedic timing, just that little sprinkling of smugness that the best MCU villains have, and indeed the best MCU characters have overall. I just think he fits into this cast so well. Even throughout the episode, I was like, listen, I know the betrayal is coming. Okay, I know it's just around the corner. I get that. But can I just enjoy this episode, seeing Zemo work alongside Sam and Bucky? Can I just savor that? Because they make a good team. Yes, they do. They make a better team than Sam and Bucky on their own, apparently. So considering the action sequences that we got in this episode, I just think Zemo fit right into, and again, it's a trap because we know the other shoe is gonna drop. We know, but he was like I will say though, before we dive into this scene by scene, I did have several questions about Zemo's involvement to begin with, because it kind of doesn't make sense. Like, if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, it kind of doesn't make sense. I think that this series is very well written overall, especially when it delves into more, you know, psychological and ideological themes throughout the issues. Like, I think it's done very, very well in kind of enveloping those very real world themes into the world of the MCU, especially post-Blip. But when it comes to the kind of contrivances that they've made for the villains and also for Zemo, some of it doesn't quite make sense. Like, for example, Bucky saying in the previous episode that if there's one person who knows Hydra the best, it would be Zemo. I would disagree with that. Like, I would tend to disagree. There are a few people that I can think of that have better knowledge on Hydra. Like, where's Nick Fury? Where's Alexander Pierce from Captain America the Winter Soldier? Like, Robert Redford? Where's Bucky himself? Like, Bucky's been working for Hydra longer than Zemo's been alive. So how does he know less about Hydra than Zemo does? Like, I know that Zemo was invested in looking into Hydra, but surely he doesn't know more than Bucky does, because he was on the outside looking in, whereas Bucky was literally working for them, doing whatever they needed him to do involuntarily. But having said that, even if you do accept the fact that Zemo knows the most about Hydra because of his research on the super soldier serum and everything, then my question becomes, well, how much research did he do? How much? Because in this episode, it's established that he spent years hunting down the Hydra recruits who were out there trying to get the super soldier serum, and Hydra trying to make this army of super soldiers. He was trying to prevent that, and he made that his life's mission. But when did he do that? Because it seems to me that his prime motivation is the fact that the Avengers essentially destroyed his home country of Sokovia to the point where the surrounding countries just kind of absorbed it and caused it to be wiped from the map entirely, as he explains at the end of the episode. I don't quite understand when he would have had time to do all of this deep diving into Hydra to the point where he would know more about Hydra than the Winter Soldier himself, when the events of Age of Ultron, which was the film where Sokovia was completely decimated in, take place a year before the events of Captain America Civil War. But then you could also argue that maybe he was working towards this even before the events of Sokovia. He was this kind of, soldier who was in this specific task force or whatever, so maybe he was already involved in that kind of mission beforehand, but then he saw what happened to Sokovia and it made him even more passionate about eradicating super soldiers and whatever, which, okay, I mean, that's not really established in Captain America the Civil War, but fine, we could rewrite history in that way, just kind of retcon it a little bit. But then the question becomes, well, why does he care about super soldiers overall? Why does anyone care about super soldiers overall when we're living in a post-blip world where Thanos literally made half the universe disappear? Who cares about some, somewhat stronger soldiers? Soldiers who can, I guess, like, bang a door in and maybe lift a car. Like, who cares about that when we literally have Thanos destroying half the universe? I feel like everyone is procrastinating here. I feel like everyone needs to put their brains and their fighting skills to better use, because this is really not the main issue. This is really not the biggest problem that's plaguing the universe at this time, because there were literal aliens who came down from space in 2012 in New York, and then there were literal armies of robots created by Tony Stark's AI, okay? And then there was a literal god-man titan being who was able to snap people out of existence to the point where it was only reversed 5 years later. No one cares about super soldiers. That's the biggest issue with this whole series, and like the plot line surrounding the Flagsmashers and the villains. Like, I love the fact that Zemo is back, but no one cares about super soldiers. But anyways, now that I've expressed my grievances, okay, some of the issues that I have with the plot of this series overall, at least so far, now we can delve into some of the aspects of this episode that I particularly enjoyed, especially when it came to the interactions between Zemo and Sam and Bucky. So first of all, at the beginning of the episode, we see Sam and Bucky head towards Zemo's prison in Berlin, and Bucky insists on going in there on his own in order to speak to Zemo directly. And at that point, my brother called it. Like, my brother actually called it. He was like, he's gonna say the words, and I was like, god damn it, he's gonna say the word. I knew he was gonna say the words, and that's exactly what he did. He literally said the words that Hydra used against Bucky to turn him into the Winter Soldier. That was the first thing that he did. And honestly, I have so much respect for the character for doing so, because if you're a bad guy, why even hesitate? Like, what? Oh, that's what makes him so deliciously evil. Like, why would you even hesitate? That's the first thing you would do. It's like, let me try this out. Like, I know it probably won't work, but let's just see how it goes. And he's already starting to get into Bucky's head. But you see, Bucky has already put measures in place in order to allow him to, yes, escape, because that's exactly what happens. Bucky helps Zemo escape from the prison, and then he tells Sam after the fact, presenting it to him as if it's a hypothetical situation. Now, this scene is key for several reasons. First of all, we get to see Zemo in action for the first time in this series, and you're reminded of the fact that he was this kind of special ops soldier, okay? He knows what he's doing. He knows his way around, weapons and fighting and all of that. So that's a good reminder to have for the rest of the episode. And secondly, you're also able to get an insight into how Bucky's mind worked as the Winter Soldier, because up until this point, we've really been focusing on his, physical attributes when it comes to him being able to run really fast as a van, or him being able to fall, 400 feet from the sky, stuff like that. How strong he is, how fast he is, how his metal arm can tear things open. But this time around, we got to look at his, strategic thinking, the way that he had already analyzed the prison as he was walking through it. He already understood what the guard changes would be, how they would react to a fire alarm, how they would react to a fight that had taken place, and how he could instigate that fight. Like, he'd already figured all of that out, which just goes to show you, like, that's why he's the Winter Soldier. It doesn't just take a super soldier serum in order to make an assassin like that. Now, it's during this scene where Bucky is explaining this hypothetical of his that we do get some cuts back to Sam's reaction. And Sam's just like, have you forgotten that this man framed you for the death of King T'Chaka? Okay, because I don't think Wakanda has forgotten. Okay, my guy, like, I don't think Wakanda has forgotten. And I should have known. I should have known then from that moment, because of course that comes back around at the end of the episode. We'll talk about that in a second. But in that moment, Bucky's just like, yeah, okay, I didn't forget, but like, we have to weigh the pros and cons of the situation, and Zemo can get us some information that we need regarding these super soldiers. Again, I personally don't know why they matter. I personally don't know what the problem is when it comes to the super soldiers, but whatever. We're rolling with the punches, right? So then Zemo makes his dramatic appearance. Sam's like, hell no. Bucky's like, let's just roll with it. Okay, you've done this for me once, just do it for me again. I feel like Bucky's asking for a lot at this point, but it's fine. We're just rolling with the punches, like I said. So then we learn some very interesting things about the character of Zemo in the sequences that precede this. We learn that the guy is actually a Baron. That is MCU canon now. Baron Zemo is in fact an actual Sokovian Baron who's very wealthy, who has all of these cars, okay, and he's able to get his supplies from his cars, including his famous purple mask. And we also see him headed towards a private jet. We learn more about the character during this sequence, and it's just fun to see Bucky and Sam go along on this ride. Like, yeah, I guess we're just gonna trust him now. Like, he could have taken them anywhere. He could have taken them to the depths of the ocean, okay, on that private jet, and just dropped them off there. They couldn't do anything about it. But anyways, but just when we're starting to get comfortable with the idea of traveling around the world with Zemo, with Zemo himself, it seems as though this character isn't quite as relaxed, okay, isn't quite as friendly as he first may look like it, because he does manage to get his hands on Bucky's book. This is the book that he's been writing all of his names in order to kind of make amends with people that he needs to, as we saw in the first episode of the series. Now, I suspected that this book was kind of like a mirror to Steve Rogers' book, which he had in Captain America the Winter Soldier, where he was writing down all of these, pop culture references that he wanted to investigate, I guess, different kind of films and TV shows and albums that he was supposed to check out in order to catch up with the times. But it turns out that is the exact book. Like, that is the book that Steve used. Somehow Bucky managed to get his hands on it, and now he's using it in order to create this list of people that he needs to make amends to after his role as the Winter Soldier. So Baron Zemo is able to get his hands on that real quick, like, just he's able to get his hands on that super easily, which tells me this guy's sharp, okay? He might be friendly, he might be hospitable on the outside, but on the inside, he's got other things going on, definitely. But just as Baron Zemo is super sharp and super on it at all times, it turns out so is Bucky, because he manages to snatch the book right out of his hands and threatens him, says that he's going to kill him if he sees him with that book again. And then you have Sam kind of jumping in. He recognizes the book as the one that Steve had when they first met in Captain America the Winter Soldier, and he mentions his recommendation to Steve to check out the Marvin Gaye Trouble Man album, and Bucky's like, yeah, like, it was good, like like Sam's asking him, like, did you like the album, like, did you like it? And Bucky's just like, yeah, it was fine, yeah, I like 40s music. And Baron Zemo steps in and he's like, what do you mean? Like, this album was quintessential reflection of African-American culture and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just sitting here thinking, what? When did Zemo get woke? And it happens throughout the episode as well, when later on they arrive at Madripoor and Sam comments on his, outfit and the fact that he has to dress like this guy called the Smiling Tiger, and he looks a little bit ridiculous in his eyes. He says that he looks like a pimp. And Zemo actually has the audacity to say, and I quote, only an American would assume that a fashion-forward black man would look like a pimp. Like, Zemo said this. This came out of Zemo's mouth. So my thinking is that at some point in time, Zemo received some African-American studies lessons, okay, during his time in the Berlin prison, because what's going on? He's listening to Marvin Gaye. He's commenting on, Sam's comments about, African men's fashion. Like, please. But again, it's the more human moments like that that make you wish they could actually be a team together, because they do have good banter. But at the same time, it kind of makes you put your guard down, because you forget that this guy is very dangerous. Okay, he has ulterior motives, and we need to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on him at all times, even when he's being super charming and relatable. So next they arrive at Madripoor, which is described as this kind of lawless place where Zemo seems to have a contact that can tell them where they could find the supplier to the super soldier serums. Madripoor as a place reminds me of if, Singapore was the wild, wild west. Basically, it's like Singapore or Hong Kong with like no laws and an incredibly diverse population. Like literally, it seems to just be this melting pot of criminals, people running away from all of the criminal things that they've done in the rest of the world. Okay, it's a very interesting environment that they've cultivated in that area of the world. But Zemo makes it clear that because of this lawlessness, it is paramount that they act the part. And so you see Sam slipping into the role of this African man who, I don't know what his role is, but he's a pretty big deal. I guess the Smiling Tiger, I think his name was. And then of course you have Bucky slipping into the role of the Winter Soldier. Now notably, Sam is much less comfortable with this kind of covert operation where he's supposed to be acting like someone else than Bucky is, because he's very much able to slip into the role of the Winter Soldier. Like, what really stood out to me during the sequences was how he was able to turn that on so quickly, like really quickly. And Zemo himself comments on this. But seeing Zemo use Bucky like the asset that he was to Hydra, I mean, we saw the word asset be dropped in the previous episode by FakeCap, okay, when he referred to Bucky in that way. But here we see it be actualized in the way that Zemo is treating Bucky and, using him as the Winter Soldier, speaking Russian directly to him. And you'll note that during those sequences, no one else speaks to him. Like, they speak around him. They're like, oh my God, is that the Winter Soldier? But the only person that speaks directly to him is Zemo, because he's supposed to be the one who's giving him orders. So it's a very creepy dynamic, and I just couldn't help but feel like, man, that's setting this guy back when it comes to his therapy for sure. That is so unhealthy. And not to mention, during this sequence that takes place in the bar where Zemo orders the Winter Soldier to attack, we see a bunch of people get out their phones and film the incident, which to me tells me that that footage is going to end up on the internet, and perhaps the US government is going to see it and revoke the pardon that they gave him. I don't know. Like, I don't know if he'll be able to go back to the US is my point. And of course, as is common with this series at this point, when things are looking bad, they can only get worse, because as creepy as it was seeing Zemo ordering the Winter Soldier around like he was nothing but a weapon, it gets even creepier when he finally is able to gain access to his connect, who is called Selby. And Zemo's whole plan apparently was to offer up the Winter Soldier as a payment for getting more information on whoever created the super soldier serum. Like, he literally offers Bucky up for sale. I was like, please no. I was like, please no. Just to see this character who's clearly tried so hard to regain his autonomy and his sense of a self-identity, especially as we see at the first episode of the series, kind of be reduced to just being the weapon once again, who gets pointed at all these different directions depending on who, is in charge of him and what their motivations are, is absolutely heartbreaking. Just scary, terrifying, because it makes you realize that this is what his existence was like for decades before he managed to snap out of the Hydra conditioning. Now, unfortunately, during this scene, despite the fact that the gang were trying their hardest to stay in character, okay, Zemo was very much up for that task, and as was Bucky, as I said. But it's Sam and his sister, Sarah. It's Sarah who gives Sam a call at the worst possible moment, and she ruins the illusion for them all. I was really upset with Sarah at that point. I was like, Sarah, I'm a fan of you as a character, but why? But luckily they managed to escape after a mysterious guardian angel is able to shoot Selby on sight, and it turns out that their guardian angel is of course Sharon Carter, who we expected to return for this series, and we get a chance to see her and catch up with her in this episode. And we find out that because of the fact that she, stole the shield from the US government during the events of Captain America Civil War, as well as stealing Sam's wing pack in order to help him, save Bucky and all of that situation from Civil War, she was basically exiled from the country. She literally cannot return to the US, or she would face, imprisonment for some indeterminable amount of time. Like, I don't know what the punishment is for stealing Captain America's shield to give it back to Captain America. Like, I don't know what the sentencing for that would look like, because that seems a little weird to me. As she mentioned, there's a lot of hypocrisy involved there, and she's clearly disillusioned with the idea of Captain America as a mantle and the shield and what it's supposed to stand for. She sees it for the propaganda that it actually is, which is interesting to me. And what's even more interesting is that it seems as though Bucky is at odds with her perspective, because it seems as though he's still drinking the Kool-Aid of the idea of Captain America, even though I presumed after the events of last week's episode that he would have dropped that by now. Like, I don't know. I understand that he believed in Steve Rogers, his friend, because that's something that he believed in from the very beginning. That was established in Captain America the First Avenger, where Steve asked Bucky to follow him as Captain America, and he says, I don't know who this Captain America is, but I do know the the little kid from Brooklyn. I know that guy, and that's who I'm going to be following. And that's been established from the very beginning. So the idea that Bucky would be so attached to the shield, like, maybe it's because he associates it so closely with Steve now, but from the very beginning it was established that he followed the leader, not the leader's costume or the mantle itself. And if you want to talk about leadership and, Bucky following the person who's doing the right thing, then I think in a way he's already kind of pledged his allegiance to a new Captain America, shield or not, because he's followed Sam throughout this mission. Like, he actually joined Sam on this mission, even though he wasn't called to do so in episode 2, where he just said, like, I'm coming with you. Like, he invited himself to this mission because the Flagsmashers weren't his problem a second ago. But one of the first things that he did, as his therapist predicted, was disturb the peace that he had established for himself and join Sam on yet another mission. And so the idea that he would be, attached to the shield, I think perhaps throughout this series he would realize that the shield was never really what he was attached to. It was more the idea of someone stepping up to, the plate and being a new Captain America in every single way, apart from perhaps the specific costume and the specific shield itself. But anyways, even though Zemo's contact ends up falling through because Sharon shot her, okay, she was supposed to lead them towards whoever created the super soldier serum, but it turns out that Sharon also has her own connects because she's like an art dealer now. Like, she's a hustler basically. Like, she's had to learn to hustle, okay, and she's in the art world, which I guess, if you're learning to hustle but you're also a good guy, the art world is a pretty safe bet. She's selling a lot of real artworks, priceless artworks in the black market, and as Bucky and Zemo explained to Sam, most of the time the artwork that you see in museums apparently is fake. I don't know, I haven't verified this myself. As Sam was trying to verify it on Google, like when they were saying it. But it's later on that we see this massive party where the guests, the potential buyers, are kind of looking at the artwork, and you just get this little montage of the gang having a fun time at the party. In particular, Zemo, I'm telling you, Daniel Bro was doing the thing, okay? Zemo is dancing at the club. Zemo is dancing at the club. He's taking shots. He's checking out the artwork. Like, he's having a fun time. So later on, at the crack of dawn, okay, after their wild night out, they managed to meet the doctor who created this version of the super soldier serum. His name is Dr. Wilfred Nagel, and he seems to be working for the Power Broker now. Now, previously in this episode, it's established that the Power Broker is essentially the king of Madripoor. Nothing goes down without his knowledge, which will be interesting to see, whether they encounter this character. But I already suspected his involvement in this whole series in my review last week, just because of Google, like just because of Googling, you know, all of these MCU characters that could be connected to the series. So it makes sense to me that he would be potentially the big bad of the show. But yes, Dr. Nagel is working for the Power Broker, although he wasn't always. Previously, he was, of course, associated with Hydra, but then, of course, after the fall of Hydra, the CIA scooped him up, as they did with real life Nazi scientists, whatever. We can talk about that another day. But they ended up proceeding with the super soldier program. They wanted to create an army of super soldiers. What's new? Of course, they wanted an army of super soldiers. Like, that's the one thing that just makes complete sense here. So they used him and his new version of the serum that was supposed to be this perfected kind. And of course, it's during the scene that we also find out that Dr. Nagel used the DNA samples that he got from Isaiah Bradley that were forcefully taken from him during his time in prison in order to kind of isolate the super soldier molecules and be able to kind of replicate them, to mass produce them, whatever, into like 20 vials of the thing. Something of that sort. Like something science of that sort, right? So whatever the explanation is, that guy is a dickhead, okay? That guy is a dickhead for sure. And so when Baron Zemo shoots him in the head, I'm like, oh, but also who cares? Like, he had it coming. But of course, Baron Zemo, as I said, he has a plan in his mind the whole time. As likable as he can sometimes be, the man is on a mission, okay? So he has the opportunity to kill the man who could potentially recreate the super soldier serum, and he takes that opportunity without question, without hesitation, because he knows that as long as this guy is still around, it doesn't matter what samples the Flagsmashers have their hands on, this guy can always make more. But eventually the whole place blows up anyways, and they do manage to escape. Although for a second there, I can't remember who, but someone asks if they've seen Zemo around, and he does slip away. He slips away during that explosion, and I thought, is this the time? For a second, I thought that this is when the betrayal was going to be happening, but no. Instead, he reappears with his purple mask, and he fights with the gang. He helps them out, because the gang are still trying to find their footing when it comes to fighting together as a team, especially Sam and Bucky. You know, Sharon is like, guys, get it together. And Sam and Bucky are like, I thought you were going left. I thought you were going right. But Zemo is on it, like on it. And this is why I say, like, I wanted him to be a part of the team because they worked so well together. He cleared the way for them. How kind of him, how generous of him. And then he managed to get them transportation to get the hell out of Dodge. I love that sequence. And like I said, I know the betrayal is coming. I know it's just a matter of time. But until the inevitable happens, I'm just going to sit back and have a fun time with it. Like, I'm enjoying myself, okay? Now, we did also have that little callback to the famous scene in Captain America Civil War where Sam and Bucky were in that tiny Volkswagen. And Bucky asks Sam to put his chair up and Sam refuses, okay? That's the scene that birthed this entire series, probably. But we also say goodbye to Sharon in this scene. I don't know if she's going to be making a reappearance for the rest of the series. Probably, like I can imagine that she'll be coming back, but for now they're parting ways. And until next time, I will say that this episode did a lot in order to kind of bolster the character and really show what she can do, especially when it comes to action sequences. But lastly, when it comes to the gang, they do head back to Zemo's private jet where they discover that Carly, the leader of the Flagsmashers, was actually trying to visit her, I guess, mother figure called Donya, who'd been sick with tuberculosis, and she was in one of the GRC settlement camps in Latvia. So that's where they head off to next. And it's when they land in Latvia that Zemo once again leads them towards this place that he has in the area, okay, because we're just trusting Zemo with our lives now, whatever. But he's also talking about, you know, the events that transpired surrounding Sokovia and it disappearing from the map. And he kind of makes the guys feel bad by saying, like, did you even visit the memorial? Like, I bet you didn't. Okay, he feels some type of way when it comes to what happened to Sokovia, of course. But then you also get the departure of Bucky, because Bucky seems a little bit distracted during this conversation because he seems to be following breadcrumbs. He seems to be following actual breadcrumbs in the form of these beads, and honestly, I'm embarrassed. I'll hold my hands up and say I'm embarrassed by how long it took me to realize, because I should have known. It's been a while since I've seen the film, see? I should have known, because yes, he's picking up the beads and they have these little symbols on them, but it still didn't register in my brain until he's in the middle in the middle of this like street, and all of a sudden he turns around. The camera work is doing the job, right? The camera work, we're bouncing back and forth trying to figure out what he's looking for, but then it pans over to none other than one of the Dora Milaje, the one who was in Captain America Civil War. I can't remember her name in the MCU, but I'll jot it down here. But I listen, you know what? No, I'm not even gonna say anything. Pop quiz time, okay? I want you guys to guess what my reaction was to seeing one of the Dora Milaje standing in front of Bucky. I want you to guess what my reaction was to hearing her speaking Wakandan and saying, "I'm here for Zemo." I want you to guess. Jot your thoughts down below. If your answer is anything like "I fell to the floor," "I did star jumps," "I did cartwheels," "I ran outside," like if it's anywhere along those lines, then you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Okay, and finally, it's time to delve into the Flagsmashers themselves. Now, like I said earlier, I have been neglecting them a little bit because, quite frankly, at this point in time, they're not my favorite plot line to follow in the series. We'll see if that changes anytime soon. But yeah, but once again, I have to say, I am ashamed. I am ashamed by how long it took me to make certain connections about the ideologies that are being explored in this series with the characters in the Flagsmashers and their ideologies and their principles. Like, I should have put it together much sooner than I did, especially because I've studied international relations at university. What really stood out to me is that Karli Morgenthau, I hope I'm pronouncing that even a little bit correctly, but her philosophy and that of the Flagsmashers overall seems to coincide more with the liberal interpretation of international relations. Again, I studied this stuff and I forgot, but this is really interesting and somewhat ironic because it seems as though her name, Karli Morgenthau, seems to be inspired by Hans Morgenthau, who was a real-life political thinker who actually subscribed to the realism approach to international relations, which was the approach for a very long time, especially when you're looking at Eurocentric international relations and when it comes to the power dynamics that take place between different countries, and you know, the idea of statehood and the idea of the zero-sum game. Essentially, the idea surrounding, you know, liberal international relations is the idea of kind of breaking down a lot of those barriers, encouraging, you know, free trade and encouraging interconnectivity between different states, as opposed to the realism interpretation where it's very much, you know, every state for themselves and creating these kind of power dynamics where your state is, you know, one up and another one has to be one down. And that seems to be the approach that is more akin to what we see with the GRC, especially considering that during the campaign that we see at the beginning of the episode, there is this strong emphasis on flags. It seems to be emphasizing the need for borders, which is of course directly in conflict with what the Flagsmashers stand for. Now, of course, in traditional Marvel fashion, instead of just presenting us with the GRC being the huge solution, okay, the problem solver to a lot of the issues that people are facing post-blip, they complicate matters by exploring the idea that the GRC may not be as resourceful, they may not be as efficient, and perhaps even a sprinkling of corruption might be in there, because we see Karli and the gang break into a GRC settlement in, I believe, Latvia or maybe some other place in Europe. I can't remember. We were going back and forth so often, and they managed to steal 6 months worth of supplies in order to help people who are, you know, in need of them. But she doesn't stop there, because she seems to want to make her message clear, and she feels like violence is the only language that these, you know, governmental bodies speak. So she sends a message by blowing up the car that she was supposed to drive away in, and therefore likely killing all of the people within the GRC kind of building, which would make the matter even more of a priority for FakeCap and his team, which could lead him to making some regrettable decisions, which I predict he likely will. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 3, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this episode down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!